Hey there, welcome over here to my kitchen. I'm going to be showing you a wide variety of some of my family's all-time favorite meals. I really hope you enjoy it, and let's head to my kitchen and let's start cooking. We're gonna get started off today by making this amazing Tuscan chicken and a sun-dried tomato sauce. It's very simple to throw together. So in my saucepan, I added a half a tablespoon of butter and olive oil. I let that melt down and get hot, and then I added my 1 cubed chicken breast, and I'm going to season it with salt and pepper and let it cook completely through. Once it is cooked through, I just removed it to a separate plate, and I set this plate to the side. Now into the same pan, we're going to begin on the sauce now. So I'm adding an additional tablespoon of some olive oil with a few cloves of some minced garlic, and I'm going to let the garlic get fragrant. Now you'll want to add in your 1 cup of some chicken broth, let it simmer and reduce down for a couple of minutes. Then add your 1 cup of some heavy whipping cream in, stir it all to combine, and let this simmer for an additional 3 to 4 minutes. If you know me, you know how much I love cheese, so now I'm going to be adding in a half a cup of mozzarella and a 1/4 cup of some Parmesan. I did want the sauce a little bit thicker, so I did end up adding in a quick cornstarch slurry, which was just a tablespoon of cornstarch and a tablespoon of water mixed together. As you see, the sauce is thickening up really nicely at this point. So now for the sun-dried tomatoes, I'm using this brand, and I added a 1/3 cup of those in. Next, I'm adding about 3 cups of fresh spinach in. Just stir this all together and let the spinach wilt down. After I added my chicken back in, I let it warm through in the sauce. I do want to let you know I've doubled the amount of chicken and even tripled the amount of chicken in this recipe in the past, and of course it still turns out amazing. I just only had 1 chicken breast left on hand on that particular night, so that's why I only used 1. But I just served this over the top of some egg noodles, and this is hands down one of my all-time favorite Tuscan chicken recipes. It just has amazing flavor. Now we're making this new minestrone soup recipe. My daughter absolutely devoured this one, and this is for all of my meatless meal friends. So I'm going to begin by chopping up 1 zucchini, 2 stalks of celery, 2 medium carrots, and 1 white onion. Over to my Dutch oven, or you could use a large pot. I have 2 tablespoons of some hot olive oil in there. I added all the veggies that we chopped up along with a little dash of some salt. I'm going to stir these vegetables all together to get coated in the oil, and I'm going to let these vegetables soften for about 8 minutes. After those 8 minutes, you'll want to add in your 28 ounces of crushed tomatoes, or you could use diced tomatoes, whatever your preference is, 14 ounces of some tomato sauce, 1 drained and rinsed can of some kidney beans, 5½ cups of vegetable broth, or you could use chicken broth, kind of whatever you have on hand. For the seasonings, to give this some great flavor, I'm adding in a tablespoon of dried basil, 2 teaspoons of dried parsley, and a teaspoon of oregano. Give this a really good stir, and I let this simmer covered for about 15 minutes. After those 15 minutes of simmering, my house was smelling scrumptious, so now I just added in my 1.5 cups of smaller pasta noodles. I'm going to let these noodles cook for about 10 minutes or until they are tender. Lastly, I added in 2 cups of some chopped spinach, let it wilt down, and then it was ready to serve. This is my bowl of food. I just topped mine with some Parmesan cheese, of course. Like I said previously, my daughter devoured this meal. I love minestrone soup because it really does make for some great leftovers for lunch the next day, and it's a great hearty meal. I can make these French onion smothered pork chops for weeks and probably not get tired of them. So now that's what we're making. I'm just going to begin by slicing my 2 yellow onions into rings, or you could slice them into half moon shapes, kind of whatever your preference is. So now over to my saucepan, I just added 2 tablespoons of butter, and I'm going to add a tablespoon of some olive oil along with the butter, and I'm going to let this melt down and get hot. Once it is melted down and hot, I'm going to add my onions in. After sauteing those onions for about 5 minutes, I'm going to now be adding in 1/4 cup of some beef broth. I'm going to continue to cook these onions for an additional 12 to 15 minutes or until the onions are extremely tender and golden brown like this. So now I'm just going to remove them to a separate plate and set these onions to the side. After I added my 4 medium thick pork chops in, I'm going to season them with a little bit of thyme, garlic powder, salt, and pepper on each side. And these pork chops are only going to cook for about 3 to 4 minutes on each side. I did flip them at the halfway point. After I removed our pork chops to a separate plate and set that plate to the side, I added back in our onions to the pan along with 2.5 tablespoons of some all-purpose flour. I'm just going to stir the onions and flour together until the flour no longer looks white. And then you're going to want to add in 1 cup of some beef broth and then whisk this all together and let it simmer until this starts to thicken up. Now that my sauce is at the thickness that I like it to be, I'm just adding back in our cooked pork chops, and I made sure to cover them in the sauce. I'm going to be adding 5 slices of some cheese all over the pork chops. I'm going to place the lid on top for about a minute or 2 or until the cheese melts, and this is the finished product. All I have to say about this meal is, oh dear, this meal is so good. I could eat these smothered pork chops all the time. Like I said before, they are that scrumptious. I just served these pork chops over some mashed potatoes with some steamed peas. This meal is just so amazing. It was particularly cold on this day, so that called for some lasagna soup. I'm just going to begin by adding my 1 pound of some mild Italian sausage to my large pot with a tablespoon of some hot olive oil in it. You could really use any type of sausage you like. You could even use ground beef for this recipe, kind of whatever you like. After I added my sausage in, I just added a couple cloves of some minced garlic with 1 diced up white onion. I'm just going to cook this sausage completely through. Now that my sausage is browned and nice and cooked, I'm just going to be removing all of the excess grease. If you've been on my channel for a while and watched some of my previous videos, you've probably seen me do this, but I like to just twirl a paper towel around my pot until all of the grease is removed, and it is just easy cheesy. Now to get our seasonings on, I'm just adding 1/2 teaspoon of some crushed red pepper flakes, 2 teaspoons of dried parsley, 1/2 teaspoon of some dried oregano, and a teaspoon of dried basil. You'll also want to add in 2 tablespoons of some tomato paste, 24 ounces of marinara sauce. You could really use any type of marinara sauce you like. I chose to use the Prego. 7 cups of some vegetable broth, and you're going to want to bring this up to a boil. You can't really tell, but once my soup started to boil, I went ahead and added my 9 lasagna noodles in, and I made sure to break the lasagna noodles up into smaller pieces. You're going to stir this occasionally and let your noodles cook until they are to the softness that you like them to be. While we do have our noodles cooking, I'm going to go ahead and work on our cheese mixture. So into the smaller sized bowl, I added 1 cup of some cottage cheese, or you could choose to use ricotta cheese, whatever your preference is, 1/2 cup of mozzarella, 1/2 cup of Parmesan, and a teaspoon of some dried parsley flakes. Give this a really good stir. After my soup was cooked, we just placed it into bowls, and then I put a little scoop of the cheese mixture right in the center. That cheese mixture will melt down and get gorgeous, but we love making this lasagna soup in my family just because it's such a fun twist on regular lasagna. If you've never made lasagna soup, I definitely recommend you making this recipe. I just served this alongside of a big side salad. Now I'm showing you my favorite way to make these quick and simple burritos that my family enjoys. So in my saucepan, I have a tablespoon of some hot olive oil. I added one super large chicken breast that I cubed to it. You're going to want to add a teaspoon of whatever taco seasoning that you enjoy and let this chicken cook completely through. Now that my chicken's cooked through, I'm just going to be squeezing the juice from a half of a lime in. I'm also adding a couple tablespoons of some water along with an additional teaspoon of some of that taco seasoning. Give this a really good stir. Of course, you could add more or less taco seasoning depending on your preference. Now it's time to assemble these burritos. So you could really add anything you like to your burrito, of course, but I like to get a big, gigantic burrito size tortilla, add some cheese to it, refried beans, white rice, of course, some of that chicken, iceberg lettuce, cherry tomatoes, sour cream, guacamole, and then some more of that cheese. After I placed all of the fixings inside of my tortilla, I rolled it up to the best of my ability, and I'm just going to place it on the pan with a little oil that I cooked the chicken in, just to crisp up the tortilla on both sides. This is the finished product. It came out nice and crisp, that tortilla. I served this with some hot taco sauce, or you could serve it with some salsa, of course. Some more of that guacamole, iceberg lettuce, and tomatoes. I really love this quick and easy meal. That's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, I would love to have you here, so go ahead and subscribe down below the video so you could see more, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.